She thought she was just helping a lonely older woman, but the moment she touched the Mafia boss's heart, she became someone he refuses to ever let go. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe. Rain tapped softly against the restaurant windows, the kind of rhythm that made the whole place feel slower, quieter. It was the mid-afternoon lull, only a handful of customers lingering over coffee and late lunches, when Nora spotted her. Table 7. An elegant older woman sat alone, dressed in a soft gray coat and pearls that looked antique rather than flashy. Her posture was perfect, her expression gentle, but her eyes darted across the menu with growing frustration. She lifted her hand when Nora approached, offering a polite smile, but when Nora asked what she'd like to order, the woman's gaze flicked down, not at the menu, but at Nora's lips. There was confusion there, then strain, then a tremble of embarrassment. "Would you like a moment?" Nora asked softly. The woman didn't respond. Not right away. Instead, she pressed 2 fingers lightly to her ear and shook her head. "Oh!" Nora felt her breath catch. She recognized the gesture instantly. She had learned it in class last semester. The woman couldn't hear her. Nora's heart squeezed, not in pity, but in recognition. She knew what it felt like to be on the outside of a conversation, to have your needs go unnoticed because people didn't know how to bridge the gap. She stepped closer, offering a gentle smile, and lifted her hands. "Can I help you?" she signed, slow and careful. The woman's entire face lit up. Her relief was so palpable, Nora felt it like warmth on her skin. Her shoulders softened, her confusion dissolved, and she reached out to touch Nora's wrist, lightly, gratefully, before signing back. "You sign?" "Still learning," Nora signed, "but I can try." The woman laughed silently, her eyes sparkling in a way that made her look years younger. She pointed at a pasta dish on the menu, then made a small grimace, a clear opinion, even without words. Nora grinned. "Not good today," she signed back, shaking her head. "But the risotto is amazing." The woman nodded enthusiastically. For the next minute, they communicated in slow, imperfect, but heartfelt motions, piecing together a full order with dessert and tea. At one point, the woman signed thank you in such a tender way, Nora felt her throat tighten. "No," Nora whispered without thinking. "Thank you." When she walked back to the counter, her coworker Emma stared at her, wide-eyed. "Since when do you speak sign language?" she whispered. "I don't," Nora said, cheeks warming. Not really, but she needed help. Emma leaned closer. "Do you know who that is?" Nora blinked. "Should I?" "That's Signora Santori, Adrian Santori's mother." The name meant nothing to Nora. It meant everything to the rest of the room. Emma's eyes darted to the corner table where 2 well-dressed men sat with unblinking focus. Security, Nora realized with a small jolt. "He owns half the city," Emma whispered. "And the half he doesn't own, he controls anyway. He's—" A shadow fell across the entrance. A presence. The door opened, letting in a gust of cool air, and a man whose arrival was instant gravity. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark suit tailored like it obeyed him. Eyes sharp enough to cut through silence. Every patron in the room stiffened. Even the staff froze. Nora didn't. Her gaze flicked instinctively to table 7. The older woman brightened the moment she saw him, raising one hand and signing something quick and affectionate. The man's expression, cold, carved, unreadable, softened just enough to betray something human. Then he followed his mother's gesture, turning toward Nora, and the softness vanished, replaced by a focus so intense she felt it like heat down her spine. He walked toward her, each step silent but impossibly heavy. When he stopped in front of her, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. "My mother tells me," he said in a low, smooth voice with the faintest Italian edge, "that you helped her." He wasn't thanking her. He was studying her, as if trying to understand why a stranger had stepped into a place no one else dared. Nora swallowed. She just needed someone to sign with. "I'm still learning, but—" "You signed with her," he repeated, like the fact meant something more than it should. His gaze dropped to her hands. the hands she had used to speak to his mother when the world around her had failed to try. Something unreadable crossed his expression. Possessive, grateful, dangerous. Before Nora could step back, his head inclined, barely, but enough to send a ripple of unease through the room. "What's your name?" he asked. Nora wet her lips. "Nora." "Thank you, Nora," he said quietly, "for seeing her." Her breath hitched. Not for helping her, not for serving her, for seeing her. And as he walked back to his mother's side, Nora didn't realize yet that one small kindness had shifted the course of her life. But Adrian Santori knew, and he wasn't taking his eyes off her again. Adrian Santori wasn't supposed to arrive for another 20 minutes. At least that's what his security detail had planned. But Adrian rarely lived according to anyone else's timeline. Not his men's, not the city's, not even fate's. When he stepped through the restaurant doors, the shift in atmosphere was instant. Conversations stuttered, silverware froze midair. Even the hum of the espresso machine seemed to hush itself. He carried power like a second skin, effortless, unspoken, and suffocating. The kind of presence that made people straighten their backs without understanding why. But he didn't notice the crowd's reaction, because the moment he walked in, he saw his mother, and someone else beside her. "Nora." He stopped mid-stride. She was leaning over the table, smiling gently as her hands moved in slow, deliberate shapes, her lips forming soft sounds that his mother was reading. His mother's eyes clouded too often by loneliness the world didn't see, were bright, alive, delighted. Nora had done that. A small flame of warmth flickered behind Adrian's ribs, unfamiliar and unwelcome. But it was quickly overwhelmed by something sharper. Curiosity, possessive interest, a need to understand the girl who had gone unnoticed by him until this exact moment. He didn't move closer. Not yet. Instead, he stood in the shadows just inside the doorway, watching her. Watching the way she tilted her head to make sure his mother could see her clearly. Watching the way she slowed her hands so there was no pressure, no rush. Watching the smile she gave after his mother signed something that made Nora laugh. No one made his mother laugh like that. Not his staff, not her caretakers, not even him. A subtle tension coiled low in his spine. A strange mixture of admiration and something darker. His right-hand man, Marco, stepped beside him. "Sir, do you want me to—" "No," Adrian said quietly, because he wanted to observe. He needed to. Nora tucked a stray piece of hair behind her ear before signing again, her fingers graceful, her expressions animated. She made his mother feel understood without speaking a single word. It wasn't her job. It wasn't expected. It wasn't normal. Most people treated his mother with fear or discomfort or excessive awkward politeness. Nora treated her like a person. Adrian exhaled slowly, controlled, as something dangerous sparked in his chest. Interest, fixation, something bordering on hunger. He stepped forward. His mother saw him first. Her eyes softened, pride flickering across her face as she signed, "This girl is kind. She speaks with her hands." Adrian's gaze snapped to Nora, who startled slightly as she realized who he was. She straightened instinctively, as if his presence rearranged her posture without her permission. Her cheeks flushed, a soft pink blooming across her skin. Not fear, he realized. Not exactly. Awareness. She was aware of him. Adrian stepped closer, slow and deliberate, until he stood near enough that she felt the heat radiating from him. Nora swallowed, her fingers tightening around her notepad. "Thank you," he said to her. Not perfunctory, not polite, but low and pointed, as if gratitude were a rare currency he did not hand out freely. "For helping my mother." Nora's lips parted. I just knew a little ASL. It wasn't a big deal." "It is to me." His eyes locked on hers, holding her still. It was too much intensity for a simple thank you. Too much for a waitress he had never seen before today. Nora cleared her throat, avoiding his stare for a moment too long. He didn't like that. Didn't like the sudden absence of her eyes. Adrian wasn't accustomed to wanting someone's attention. He reached out and lightly touched the menu she held, tilting it so he could read what she'd circled for his mother. "You recommended the risotto?" "Yes," she said softly. She wasn't sure what she wanted, so I suggested something warm. Warm. The word slipped under his skin. His mother signed something rapidly, smiling wide, and Nora translated aloud. "She says you're always too serious." A low breath slid out of Adrian's chest. Almost a laugh, but not quite. The entire time his gaze didn't leave Nora. Not when she tucked her hair again. Not when she shifted her weight nervously. Not when she tried to step back to create distance he had no intention of giving her. That little act of kindness, her patience, her attention, the way she treated his mother, had marked something inside him. She didn't know it yet, but Adrian was already rearranging his world around her, because gratitude in a man like him was never harmless. And the moment he saw her hands signing for his mother, he knew one thing with startling clarity. He was not letting this girl disappear from his sight. Nora had seen rich men before. Arrogant ones, bored ones who treated the staff like part of the furniture. But she had never seen a man like Adrian Santori. Not because of the power that seemed to radiate off him like heat. Not because the entire restaurant held its breath the moment he walked in. Not even because 2 security guards subtly adjusted formation the instant he approached her. It was the way he looked at her, focused, measuring, unnervingly intent, as if she had just stepped onto a stage she didn't know existed, and he was the only one in the audience. Nora tried to retreat, to put some distance between herself and the intensity of that gaze. But Adrian stepped forward at the same time, effortlessly reclaiming the space she'd attempted to free. "Your name is Nora," he said quietly, like he was committing it to memory rather than asking. She nodded. "Yes, sir." "Don't call me sir." His voice dipped lower. "It makes me feel old." Nora blinked, startled by the faint curve of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Something softer, almost warm. The other servers froze mid-task, eyes darting toward the interaction. No one had ever seen Adrian Santori smile at staff. He didn't smile at anyone, according to rumor. But Nora didn't know that. She just knew her pulse wouldn't steady. Sorry, she said, fumbling. "I didn't mean—" "You were respectful," he said. "Respect doesn't bother me." He paused, eyes dragging slowly over her face. Not in a predatory way, but in a way that made heat rise under her skin. As if he was memorizing the exact shape of her, storing every detail like ammunition. "But your kindness," he added softly, "that did something." Her breath stalled. "My mother doesn't trust easily," Adrian continued, "and she doesn't smile for strangers." Nora's gaze flicked to Signora Santori, who waved at her with a delighted grin that made Nora smile back instinctively. "She made it easy," Nora murmured. "No," Adrian corrected. "You did." Something shifted then. His gratitude wasn't gentle. It wasn't sweet or simple. It was heavy, carrying weight, intention, promise. The kind of gratitude that came from a man who didn't forget anything, who didn't owe lightly. And Nora felt it, like the brush of a hand on her spine. He leaned in just a fraction. Not close enough to overwhelm, but close enough for her to feel the warmth of him, the control wrapped under that suit, the storm beneath the calm surface. "I don't say thank you often," he murmured, "but you earned it." Nora swallowed. "I just wanted her to feel comfortable." "And you did," he said, "more than anyone else in this room could have." The staff stiffened, some shrinking, some glaring. Adrian didn't spare them a glance. His focus was solely, entirely, unnervingly on her. She stepped back, flustered. "I should go put in her order." Adrian didn't move. His gaze followed her retreat, slow and deliberate, like a hand sliding down her spine without touching her. "Remember something, Nora," he said, voice deep enough to vibrate the space between them. "No act of kindness goes unnoticed by me. Her heart thudded so hard she felt faint. "And none," he added, eyes narrowing slightly, "goes unpaid." The statement should have scared her. A man like Adrian Santori repaying debts was not gentle business. But the way he said it, the way his voice softened just a fraction when he looked at her hands again, the hands that had signed so patiently for his mother, sent a shiver through her that wasn't fear. Possessive, interested, claiming. He wasn't thanking her. He was marking her. And as Nora hurried toward the kitchen, trying to steady her breath, Adrian watched her go with a look that made his men exchange glances. Because their boss never looked at anyone like that. But he wasn't hiding it. Not from them. Not from the room. And not from Nora anymore. She had stepped into his mother's world with kindness, and without knowing it, she had stepped directly into his. Nora's shift ended long after sunset, the sky washed in deep navy and the streets damp with the lingering smell of rain. She wrapped her coat tighter around her, and he told herself to stop thinking about Adrian Santori, his eyes, his voice, the strange weight of his attention. She had helped his mother, nothing more. People like him didn't think twice about people like her. That was what she told herself. She believed it. Almost. Her apartment building came into view, a narrow brick complex wedged between a laundromat and a shuttered bakery. It wasn't pretty, but it was hers. Small, quiet, predictable. So when she turned the corner and saw a sleek black SUV idling in front of her gate, its headlights off, its windows tinted dark, her stomach dropped. No one with a car like that came to a neighborhood like this. Nora slowed her steps. Maybe they were lost. Maybe it had nothing to do with her. Maybe... The passenger door opened before she could finish the lie. A man stepped out. Broad shoulders, sharp suit, eyes too alert for someone waiting casually. Another emerged from the driver's side, equally imposing, equally unreadable. "Nora Hale?" the first man asked, his tone polite but completely void of warmth. Nora's pulse spiked. "Who wants to know?" "Adrian Santori sent us." She froze. No, this wasn't happening. He couldn't have... "For what?" she demanded, hugging her bag to her chest. "I already helped his mother. I'm not involved with him." The man exchanged a look with the driver. Something silent. Something that made Nora feel like she was missing a critical piece of information. "He asked us to make sure you got home safely," the man said. "Standard procedure." Standard procedure? For who? Mafiosos with mothers who needed help ordering risotto. "I don't need an escort," Nora said quickly. "Thank you, but I'm fine. Really." The driver stepped closer, not threatening, but steady, immovable. "It wasn't a request." Nora's heart kicked hard. "I don't want any trouble." "You don't have trouble," the driver replied. "You have his attention." The way he said attention made her entire body go cold. She took a step toward her building, but the first man moved subtly, blocking the entrance. Not aggressively, simply standing where she needed to pass, making it clear she wasn't walking around the situation. "Miss Hale," he said calmly, "we stay, or other people come." "What other people?" she whispered. "The kind you don't want knocking on your door at night." Her throat tightened. She wasn't sure if they were threatening her, or warning her. Maybe both. "You were seen with his mother," the man continued. "That makes you visible. People pay attention to anything involving the Santori family." Nora felt her knees weaken. "I didn't ask for any of this," she whispered. "We know," he said. Not unkindly, almost sympathetic. "But you're in it now." A car down the block drove by slowly, too slowly. The second guard shifted, his hand drifting toward his jacket in a way that told Nora exactly what was hidden there. Fear prickled across her skin. If these men left, if Adrian hadn't sent them, then whoever else was watching. She inhaled shakily. "So what do you expect me to do?" "Let us do our job," the driver said simply. "We stay outside. We drive you to and from work. We keep eyes on the building. Nothing changes for you except that you're safer." "And if I say no?" The man held her gaze. "You won't. Oi." It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. Certainty that the alternative was worse. Nora exhaled, shaky and reluctant. Fine, but only tonight. I'll tell Mr. Santori tomorrow that this isn't necessary. Neither man reacted. Neither agreed, because they already knew what she didn't. Adrian Santori did nothing temporarily. As she unlocked her apartment door, Nora felt their presence behind her. Silent, watchful, unsettlingly protective. The moment she stepped inside, the SUV's engine rumbled back to life, repositioning itself directly under her window. She shut the door and pressed her back to it, heart racing. This was absurd. This was invasive. This was dangerous. But for the first time in months, she didn't feel alone. And that terrified her even more. Because kindness had drawn Adrian Santori's attention. And now it was already too late to slip back into being invisible. The lunch rush had only just died down when Nora stepped out of the kitchen carrying a tray of clean glasses. She was tired, running on 4 hours of sleep and too much anxiety, but she kept her smile in place. She always did. It wasn't until she reached the counter that she felt the shift. Subtle at first, then unmistakable. Conversation quieted. The air grew thick, charged. Her coworker Emma straightened abruptly, eyes widening. "Oh my God," Emma whispered. "He's here." Nora didn't need to ask who. She felt him before she saw him. Adrian Santori stepped into the restaurant, not like a man entering a casual lunch spot, but like a king returning to a throne room. Dark suit immaculate, expression unreadable, presence bending the room around him. And beside him, holding his arm, was his mother. Nora's breath stilled. Signora Santori looked radiant today. Hair set neatly, pearls catching the light, eyes bright in a way Nora had only glimpsed the day before. She searched the room until she spotted Nora, and when she did, her whole face softened into a smile. Nora froze, glasses still in her hands, because nothing about this made sense. Adrian Santori didn't just visit restaurants unannounced. He didn't come twice in 2 days. He didn't linger in public settings with anyone other than his most trusted men. And he definitely didn't bring his mother with him unless he had a reason. A reason that walked on shaky legs and held a tray of glasses. He guided his mother toward table 7, the same table. The table Nora had helped her at yesterday. And he didn't sit. He simply stood behind the chair, one hand resting lightly on the back of it, his gaze fixed on Nora with an intensity that almost stole her balance. Signora Santori signed hello with a warm, sweeping motion. Nora set the tray down and approached because she couldn't pretend she hadn't seen them, because appearing rude felt worse than facing Adrian's sharp, consuming attention. She arrived at their table and forced her voice not to tremble. "Good afternoon. It's nice to see you both again." Signora Santori reached out with gentle fingers, patting Nora's hand before signing slowly, clearly. "You were kind to me." The words were simple, but the gratitude behind them was not. Her eyes glistened slightly, her expression earnest in a way that felt too intimate for a restaurant filled with prying eyes. Nora swallowed. "You deserved kindness," she signed back softly. A small gasp caught in Signora Santori's throat, a silent, emotional sound. She squeezed Nora's hand again. Adrian watched all of it. Silent, still, unmoving. Only the slight tension in his jaw betrayed the force with which he was holding himself together. "You made an impression," he said when his mother released Nora's hand. His voice was low, carrying easily despite the room's hush. "She asked to see you again." Nora blinked. "She did?" "She did," he repeated, and the way he said it made it clear there was more to the story, something he wasn't yet saying. Nora felt heat crawl up her neck. She was used to being polite, helpful, invisible when needed, but being singled out, by this woman, by him, set her nerves on edge. Signora Santori signed again, slower this time. "You speak beautifully with your hands." Nora's chest tightened. "I'm still learning," she murmured, signing the same words. Her mother's delighted nod made something warm flicker in Nora's stomach, something like pride, something like connection. But Adrian watched her hands like they were revealing secrets she didn't know she possessed. His gaze flicked from her fingers to her face, lingering a beat too long, tracing the curve of her expression with something unmistakably possessive. He wasn't thanking her, he was cataloging her, and it made her pulse race for reasons she didn't dare unpack. Emma appeared at Nora's elbow with menus, but Adrian lifted a hand, the smallest gesture but powerful enough to make her stop mid-step. "We won't need menus," he said, without looking away from Nora. "My mother already knows what she wants." Signora Santori nodded, signing one word. "You." Nora blinked, confused. "Me?" His mother smiled and mimed writing on a pad. Adrian translated in that smooth, unhurried voice. "She wants you to take her order." Nora felt her breath catch. Dozens of staff worked here. Servers with years of training. Servers who knew the Santori reputation far better than she did. But Signora Santori wanted her. And Adrian. Adrian wanted her near enough that his mother didn't have to ask twice. Nora touched her apron nervously. "Of course, whatever she wants." His mother signed. "You choose again. I trust you." Nora's throat tightened. She nodded gently, unable to stop the small smile that tugged at her lips. But the moment she looked up, she found Adrian watching her with a look that made her exhale sharply. Not gratitude, not courtesy. Something darker. Something closer to possession. Something that whispered one undeniable truth. Nora had done more than help his mother. She had stepped into Adrian Santori's orbit, and he had no intention of letting her drift out again. The rain had started as a mist, a soft drizzle that clung to Nora's hair and eyelashes as she walked the long blocks toward her apartment. She hugged her thin coat tighter around herself, the streetlights casting yellow halos across the wet pavement. She should have taken the offer. Adrian's men had lingered outside the restaurant again, the same two who insisted she text if you need a ride. She didn't text. She didn't want to depend on him. She didn't want to feel indebted to a man whose shadow stretched across the entire city. But halfway home, she regretted it. A set of footsteps trailed behind her, slow at first, then faster, matching her pace. She tried not to panic, but the hairs on her arms rose, her heartbeat stumbling into an uneven rhythm. She crossed the street. The footsteps crossed too. Her breath quickened. She reached for her phone, but a hand shot out of the alley beside her, grabbing her elbow hard enough to twist her off balance. "Hey," a voice slurred, breath reeking of alcohol. "Where you going in such a hurry, sweetheart?" Nora froze, cold dread flooding her chest. She tried to pull away, but the man tightened his grip, dragging her closer. His fingers dug painfully into her skin. "Let go," she whispered, voice shaking. "Please, I don't..." "Don't what?" he sneered. "Don't want company? Too bad." His other hand reached toward her waist. A shadow detached from the darkness behind them. Silent, purposeful, deadly. Before Nora could scream, the man was yanked off her so violently he flew backward and slammed into the brick wall. He choked on a breath, stunned and gasping. Adrian Santori stood between them. No coat, no hesitation, no trace of the calm, controlled man she'd met in the restaurant. Cold fury radiated off him in waves, and emotion sharpened into something lethal. In the dim streetlight, he looked like a nightmare carved into human shape. The man tried to stumble to his feet. I didn't know she was..." Adrian moved without a word. One hand fisted the stranger's shirt, slamming him back against the wall. The crack echoed through the alley. The man's breath hitched, a whimper caught in his throat. "You put your hands on her," Adrian said, voice almost gentle. The softness made it worse, because underneath it rippled pure, bone-deep violence. "You thought you could touch her and walk away." I didn't..." A sharp, brutal punch cut off his plea. The man crumpled to the ground, coughing, wheezing. Nora's heart pounded against her ribs as she watched, frozen. She had heard rumors, everyone had. The stories of Adrian Santori's ruthlessness, his efficiency, the quiet way he erased threats. But seeing it, Seeing him like this was different, terrifying, real. He wasn't the composed man who translated for his mother. He wasn't the man who watched Nora with quiet curiosity. He was the monster the city feared, and he'd appeared the second she was in danger. Adrian lifted his hand again, ready to strike, to end it. But something in Nora snapped. "Stop!" she cried. Her voice cracked through the alley like a gunshot. Adrian froze. He didn't look at the man curled on the ground. He looked at her. Slowly, his chest rose and fell, as if he were dragging air back into lungs that had been filled with rage. Then he stepped back, letting the stranger slump sideways. For one horrible second, the only sound was the patter of rain. Then Adrian turned toward her, and the violence drained from his expression so fast it almost made her dizzy. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides. "Nora," he murmured, his hands rising, but not to touch her face, not to pull her close. Instead, he gently took her wrists, turning her palms upward, then her fingers, his brows tightening. "Are you shaking?" She stared at him, stunned. You were about to kill him." His jaw clenched. "He laid hands on you." "That doesn't mean—" "It means everything." His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist, feeling her pulse, fast, unsteady. He inhaled slowly, as if grounding himself with the rhythm of her heartbeat. "I need to know you're not hurt," he said quietly. "Tell me where he touched you." "This isn't normal," she whispered. What you just did." "No," he agreed softly, meeting her gaze with something frighteningly sincere. "It isn't normal. Not for most men." His fingers traced the faint red mark on her arm, rage flickering in his eyes again before he controlled it. "But I'm not most men," he murmured, "and you're not someone I allow to be harmed." Her breath caught, because beneath all the danger, beneath the violence and the fury, there was something else in his voice. Something that terrified her more than the shadows around them. He cared. He cared too much, and there was no going back from that. The walk from the alley to Nora's apartment should have taken 5 minutes. With Adrian beside her, it felt like crossing a fault line, every step echoing with the knowledge that nothing between them was simple anymore. He didn't touch her. Not her arm, not her back, not even the sleeve of her coat. But his presence pressed against her like a force field, every inch of him coiled with restrained fury. She could feel it radiating off him, thickening the air, making the night feel smaller somehow. When they reached her building, Adrian didn't stop at the sidewalk. He followed her up the steps, past the flickering light bulb the landlord still hadn't bothered to replace, and into the narrow hallway that smelled faintly of old paint. Nora fumbled with her keys, her fingers still unsteady. "Let me," Adrian murmured. He didn't wait for permission. His hand covered hers, warm and steady, guiding the key into the lock with precise gentleness that contradicted the violence she had witnessed minutes earlier. The door swung open, but Nora didn't step inside. She turned to face him, the fear and adrenaline still spiking through her veins. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. Adrian leaned one shoulder against the doorframe, his expression unreadable, except for the simmering intensity in his eyes. "I should be anywhere you're not safe," he countered. "That's not—" Her breath hitched. "Adrian, I don't want to drag you into my life." His gaze darkened, not with anger, but with something frighteningly resolute. "You didn't drag me anywhere. I walked into it the moment you helped my mother." She shook her head. "I didn't do anything special." "You did everything special," he said quietly. "Do you understand how rare it is for someone to show kindness without motive? To treat her like a woman instead of a burden? To speak to her in a language most people don't bother to learn?" Nora swallowed. Hard. He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she felt the heat of him, close enough that she had to tilt her chin to meet his eyes. "You earned my loyalty the moment you sat beside my mother and made her feel seen," he said. "Anyone who touches my family earns that from me." His voice softened, becoming something both tender and terrifying. But anyone who touches you earns my wrath. The words slammed into her, heavy with implication. Nora's lips parted, but no sound came out. Because in that sentence, she heard everything he wasn't saying. I consider you mine. I protect what's mine, and the world will learn that you are no longer unprotected. Nora's heart thudded painfully. I'm not your family. Adrian's breath left him on a quiet, almost amused exhale, not mocking her, but softening something sharp inside him. That's where you're wrong. He lifted a hand, slowly, cautiously, as if touching her required more restraint than violence ever had. His fingers brushed her cheekbone, the barest graze, warm and reverent. You became tied to me the moment you stepped between my mother's silence and the world, he murmured. And tonight, when that man grabbed you. His jaw tightened, and for a moment the monster returned, a flicker of lethal promise beneath the surface. I felt the same fear I've felt only twice in my life, he admitted. Once when my mother was hurt, and once when I thought I reached you too late. Nora stared at him, breath unsteady, heart pounding like a warning she couldn't interpret. You can't say things like that, she whispered. I don't say things I don't mean. His thumb traced the fading red mark on her arm, his touch so careful she almost didn't feel it. Protection isn't just a duty in my world, he said. It's a claim, a vow, a line drawn in blood. She shivered, not from fear, but from the truth settling into her bones. She had become both things he protected fiercely, his mother, and now, herself. Nora stepped back into her apartment on trembling legs, but Adrian didn't follow. He simply looked at her like she was something rare, something he'd been searching for without knowing it. And Nora, he added softly, voice dropping into something dangerous and unshakable, you're no longer alone. The door closed between them with a soft click, but the truth he'd spoken settled in the room like a living thing. She wasn't just someone he wanted to keep safe. She had become someone he couldn't afford to lose. Nora tried, really tried, to pretend her life was still her own. She woke early, made coffee, packed her books, and took the bus to campus like every other morning. She blended into crowds, kept her head down, reminded herself that Adrian Santori belonged to a world far above hers, one she didn't want any part of. But pretending only worked when he allowed it, and Adrian never did. The first time it happened, she was leaving her morning lecture, juggling her textbooks and a half-finished assignment, when a shadow separated from a stone pillar. She nearly crashed into him. Adrian stood there as if he'd been waiting for hours. No guards, no entourage. Just him, dressed in a charcoal coat, black gloves in hand, watching her with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. Adrian? She whispered, stunned. You walk home from class alone, he said, ignoring her surprise completely. You shouldn't. She blinked. I didn't tell you my schedule. No, he agreed, stepping closer. But my men told me where they saw you in danger last time. It wasn't difficult to learn the rest. His tone wasn't apologetic. It wasn't proud either. It was matter of fact, like telling her the weather. She felt her pulse stutter. You can't just appear like this. His gaze swept over her face, searching for something. Fear, anger, acceptance. Whatever he found made his jaw soften by a fraction. I arrive, he said quietly, when I'm needed. The second time happened at her job. She was halfway through her shift at the bookstore cafe, steaming milk for a latte, when she sensed him long before she saw him. It was the hush that fell over the customers, the way conversations thinned, the way people lowered their eyes. Adrian approached the counter with the silent confidence of a man who never needed to ask for attention. He didn't order coffee. He didn't browse the shelves. He just watched her. Nora, he said, voice low enough to warm her skin. You didn't tell me you work nights. That's because you're not supposed to know, she muttered, nearly dropping a cup when he reached over and steadied her wrist with 2 fingers. His grip was gentle. His presence was not. My mother trusts you, he murmured, eyes darkening. I trust my mother. The words weren't sweet. They were seismic. Her breath caught. "That's not a reason to follow me." He tilted his head, studying her reaction. "It is the only reason that matters." And then he looked at her the way he looked at threats, slowly, deliberately, as if committing every detail to memory. It happened again the next day, and the next. At the grocery store, outside her building, inside the campus library, where his presence alone made a group of loud students scatter like startled birds. He wasn't stalking her, he wasn't hiding. He was showing up, everywhere, unapologetically. And each time his words, soft, dangerous, certain, echoed in her chest long after he left. "I want to understand the things you fear. I want to know what keeps you awake at night. I want to know who hurt you, so I never have to restrain myself again." The worst part was, he asked nothing in return. He didn't demand thanks. He didn't push or pry. He simply made himself present, like wind against a door she pretended was locked. And then came the night that destroyed whatever distance she thought she had left. Nora was sitting on the steps of her apartment building, exhausted from studying, when his car pulled up silently to the curb. Adrian stepped out, coat swirling slightly in the cold air, his hair damp as if he'd come straight from the rain. "Why are you here?" she whispered. He sat beside her, not close enough to touch, but close enough to steal her breath. "Because you looked tired," he said, "and because my mother asked about you today." Nora turned her face toward him, startled. "She did?" His eyes softened in a way she rarely saw, a warmth that made something deep in her chest twist. "She liked you long before I did," he said quietly. "She sees things clearly." Nora swallowed hard. And what exactly does she see? His answer came without hesitation, without shame, without softness. "She sees the woman I've chosen to protect." She stood abruptly, overwhelmed. "Chosen? Adrian, I never—" He rose with her, his voice a dangerous murmur. "I don't hide what I want, Nora. And I don't lose what I protect." Her heart thundered painfully. This is obsession." "No," he corrected gently, stepping closer. "This is certainty." And when he brushed a raindrop from her cheek, barely a touch, barely anything at all, her knees nearly buckled. Because for the first time she realized something terrifyingly true. Even if she ran, Adrian Santori would always arrive first. The day began like any other, quiet, gray, forgettable. Nora had taken the morning off classes to help Signora Santori with errands, something Adrian's mother insisted on with warm smiles and gentle hand squeezes. The older woman moved slowly but gracefully through the small Italian market, her fingers tracing baked goods, her eyes lighting up when she found Nora signing, "Do you like these?" It felt normal, soft, human, a rare calm in a life that had become anything but. But calm never lasted long around Adrian Santori. They were leaving the bakery when Nora heard it. A car door slamming too quickly, footsteps approaching too fast, voices sharp with intent rather than conversation. Her pulse stuttered. Signora Santori, blissfully unaware, signed, "Beautiful day," even as clouds threatened rain. Nora forced a smile, even as dread trickled coldly through her veins. Then she saw the man across the street. Not a customer, not a passerby. Someone watching them with too much focus. Her blood iced over. Before she could move, another man appeared behind them, blocking their path back inside the bakery. Nora reacted without thinking. She stepped in front of Signora Santori, heart hammering so hard she felt it in her throat. She raised her hand subtly, signing behind her back. "Stay behind me. Don't move." Signora Santori's fingers tightened on Nora's jacket in silent understanding. The man ahead approached with a smile stretched too tight, too false. "Ladies," he said lightly. "I'm looking for the Santori residence. Heard the boss's mother is in town." Nora's breath caught. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. A message. A threat. Adrian's mother didn't hear the words, but she saw the tension in Nora's shoulders, the fear in her eyes. She tugged Nora's sleeve anxiously, asking in frantic signs, "What's happening? Nora? Nora, tell me." Nora swallowed hard. She didn't dare translate. Instead, she stepped further forward, blocking Signora Santori completely. "You need to leave," Nora said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. "Now." The man chuckled. "Relax, sweetheart. We're just having a conversation." "No," Nora said, louder this time. "You're not." The second man reached for Signora Santori, and Nora moved instinctively, shoving him back with a force she didn't know she had. He stumbled, surprised. "You little—" He grabbed her wrist, tight, painful. Signora Santori gasped silently, covering her mouth. Nora felt fear spike so hard it made her dizzy. But she didn't step back. She stood her ground, keeping the older woman behind her, keeping herself between danger and Adrian's mother. Then the world exploded. 3 black SUVs screeched to a stop at the curb. Doors flew open. Men poured out, silent, armed, lethal. And every single one of them was Adrian's. The 2 attackers froze. For a split second, the entire street held its breath. Then Adrian stepped out of the lead SUV. Nora had seen him angry before. She had never seen him like this. His face was carved from rage, eyes burning with a fury so cold, it chilled the air around him. He looked at the man gripping Nora's wrist, then at Nora, then at his mother, trembling behind her. Something inside him snapped. His men didn't move. They didn't have to. Adrian walked forward himself, slow, controlled, terrifying. He reached them in seconds. "Let her go!" The man released Nora as if her skin had turned to fire. Adrian didn't look at him again. He cupped Nora's wrist in his hand, his touch gentle, gentler than air, his thumb brushing over the reddening skin. His jaw clenched so hard she wondered if he might fracture something. "You're hurt," he whispered. Nora shook her head. "I'm fine. Your mother—" But Adrian wasn't listening. He was unraveling. He turned to the attackers with a calm so deadly it made Nora's stomach twist. "You tried to touch my mother," he said softly. "You tried to touch the woman who protects her." His eyes lifted dark and bottomless. "You just declared war." The attackers didn't even have time to run. Adrian's men moved as one blur of violence and precision, taking them down with bone-crunching efficiency. It was over in less than 10 seconds. A message written not in words, but in broken bodies and fear-shaken breaths. The street emptied. No witnesses dared stay. Adrian finally turned back to them, his mother trembling, Nora standing protectively in front of her. Adrian went to his knees. Right there, on the broken sidewalk, he knelt before the 2 women who had nearly been taken from him. He touched his mother's hand, then Nora's, pressing her palm gently against his cheek. "You saved her again," he whispered. "You saved everything." "Adrian," Nora breathed, overwhelmed. "I just—" "You risked your life," he cut in. "For her." His voice shook. Adrian Santori's voice shook. "In my world, that is a debt written in blood," he said, "and I will pay it with blood." Nora swallowed hard, her chest tightening. Because in that moment she understood something she hadn't allowed herself to see before. Adrian's mother wasn't the only person she had become tied to. She had stepped into Adrian's world, and Adrian would burn that world to ash before letting anything happen to her. The chandelier light scattered across the ballroom like falling stars, glinting off crystal glasses and gowns worth more than Nora's yearly salary. She stood just inside the entrance, breath caught in her throat, fingers curled nervously around the small clutch Adrian's mother had insisted she borrow. It felt unreal, like she had stepped into someone else's life, someone who belonged in rooms filled with senators, CEOs, and men who ran entire empires with a single phone call. And yet, Adrian stood beside her as if she were exactly where she was meant to be. His hand rested at her waist, not gripping, not demanding, just there, warm and steady, grounding her in a world she should have been terrified to enter. His mother stood at his other side, smiling proudly, her hand wrapped around Nora's arm, as though the two of them had been family for years. People stared, whispered, tried and failed to hide their curiosity. Because Adrian Santori did not bring guests to events like this. He did not escort women. He did not show softness, or affection, or interest. But tonight, he did all three. Every time someone approached to greet him, his hand tightened just slightly at Nora's waist, a silent declaration stronger than any introduction. She should have felt trapped. Instead, she felt seen, anchored, protected. "Breathe," Adrian murmured, leaning down just enough for only her to hear. "They stare because they want to understand what I already know." Nora's pulse fluttered. "And what do you think you know?" He turned his head, eyes brushing her face with a softness that contradicted everything they whispered about him. "That they can't touch you." Her cheeks warmed. His thumb stroked the side of her waist gently, small, almost imperceptible. But in a room like this, where every gesture was studied, it was unmistakably intimate. They reached their table, where Adrian's closest allies sat. They rose respectfully as his mother took her seat, greeting her with practiced politeness. But their eyes kept sliding to Nora, questioning, weighing, assessing. Adrian noticed every one of those glances. He didn't speak, didn't scold, didn't threaten. Instead, he lifted his hands and signed. Slow, deliberate movements. "She is under my protection." Silence fell like a blade around the table. A few seats down, a man who had been eyeing Nora too boldly scoffed under his breath. "Protection? She's just a—" Adrian stopped signing. His gaze snapped toward the man with such cold precision that several people flinched. Nora felt his hand steady on her waist, but she could sense the shift in him, danger simmering beneath the surface, sharp enough to bleed the air itself. Adrian raised his hands again, each sign clearer than speech. "Speak of her again with disrespect, and you answer to me." The man paled. Adrian wasn't finished. He signed the last phrase slowly, eyes locked on Nora the entire time. "Forever." A whisper rippled through the room, some in awe, some in fear, some in envy. But Nora didn't hear any of them. She heard only her own heartbeat, loud, uneven, aching. Adrian lowered his hands and turned fully toward her, his expression softening, as if the world around them had fallen away. His mother reached over and squeezed Nora's hand, smiling with gentle pride, as if this moment had been inevitable. "You don't have to stay," Nora whispered shakily. "You don't have to say things like that." "I don't say things I don't mean," Adrian replied. "And I don't offer protection lightly." His fingers brushed down her arm, slow, reverent. "But you protected my mother. You protected me in ways you don't even understand." Nora swallowed, her voice barely breaking the hush around them. "And now I'm supposed to belong to your world?" "You already do," he said simply. "I'm only acknowledging it." She should have run from those words. Weeks ago, she would have. But tonight, surrounded by people who feared him, standing beside a man who had crossed lines, ruthless, dangerous lines, to keep her safe. She realized she didn't want to step away from him. Not anymore. Adrian watched her, really watched her, waiting for her reaction like it mattered more than every alliance in the room. She turned her hand slightly until her fingers brushed his. A silent answer, a choice she wasn't afraid of anymore. Adrian's eyes darkened, something fierce and quiet settling behind them. He leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper at her ear. "Good," he murmured. "Then let them stare. Let them whisper. Because they'll learn tonight." His hand curled around her waist again, firm and claiming. "You're mine to protect." And for the first time, Nora didn't wonder whether she should run. She wondered why she ever tried.